The storm came without warning. Nikolai Petrov huddled in his research tent as violet lightning split the alien sky, illuminating the strange crystalline formations that dotted the landscape of planet LV-247. The xenobiologist checked his atmospheric readings for the third time, wondering if he'd made a mistake in setting up camp in this particular valley. The crystals seemed to amplify the electrical activity, creating a light show that was both beautiful and terrifying. He'd been on this expedition for 3 months now, documenting the unusual mineral formations and their effects on the local flora. The Galactic Science Council had marked this planet as uninhabited but rich in scientific potential. What they hadn't mentioned was how the place seemed to have a mind of its own. The wind howled outside, carrying whispers that almost sounded like words. Nikolai had grown used to the planet's tricks, the way it played with his senses and made him question his sanity. But tonight felt different. The crystals pulsed with an inner light that didn't match their usual patterns, and his instruments were giving him readings that made no sense. Then he heard it, a sound distinct from the storm's fury. Something, or someone, was outside his tent. "Hello," he called out, reaching for his plasma torch. "Is someone there?" The tent's entrance rippled, and for a moment, Nikolai thought it was just another gust of wind. But then a figure stepped through, and his world turned upside down. She wasn't human, that much was obvious. Her skin had a translucent quality that reminded him of the crystals outside, and her eyes held an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the formations. Long flowing hair that seemed to capture and reflect the storm's energy framed a face that was both alien and breathtaking. "You are not afraid," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made his skin tingle. It wasn't a question. Nikolai lowered his torch but didn't switch it off. "Should I be?" A smile played across her features, revealing teeth that sparkled like diamonds. "Most of your kind would be. But you're different, Nikolai Petrov. We've been watching you." The fact that she knew his name should have terrified him. Instead, he found himself intrigued. "We? My people. The luminary. We are this world's caretakers, its children, and its guardians." She moved closer, each step graceful and purposeful. "I am Zara." Nikolai's scientific mind raced with questions. The planet was supposed to be uninhabited. Every survey, every scan had shown no signs of intelligent life. Yet here she stood, proof that everything they thought they knew about LV-247 was wrong. "The crystals," he said, understanding dawning. "They're not just formations. They're technology, aren't they?" Zara's expression brightened. "They are alive, in their way. They are our memory, our history, our connection to this world and each other. Your instruments cannot detect us because we exist partially in another phase of reality. The crystals help us maintain that state." Lightning crackled outside, and Nikolai saw how her skin seemed to absorb and redirect the energy. "Why show yourself to me now?" "Because you listen," she said, reaching out to touch one of his research tablets. 3 months you've been here, and not once have you tried to harvest the crystals or alter their patterns. You observe, you learn, you respect. These are traits we value. There are others like you, a whole civilization." Zara nodded, but her expression grew serious. "We have remained hidden for centuries, watching as other species came and went. Some sought to exploit our world, others to study it. None understood its true nature, but time grows short, Nikolai. Changes are coming that will affect both our peoples." Thunder shook the tent, and the crystal formations outside pulsed in response. Nikolai saw fear flash across Zora's otherworldly features. What kind of changes? "The barriers between phases are weakening. Soon, our world will fully merge with your dimension. When that happens, we will need allies who understand us, who can help bridge the gap between our peoples." She fixed him with those luminous eyes. "Will you help us, Nikolai Petrov?" He should contact his superiors immediately. This was the discovery of a lifetime. An advanced alien civilization living in phase-shifted reality. But something in Zora's expression told him that going through official channels would be a mistake. What exactly are you asking me to do? Learn our ways. Understand our truth. Become a bridge between worlds. She held out her hand, and small crystals emerged from her skin, forming intricate patterns. But be warned, this knowledge comes with a price. Once you begin this journey, there is no turning back. The storm raged around them, but in that moment, Nikolai felt an incredible sense of calm. He looked at her offered hand, then back to his research equipment. Everything he thought he knew about this planet, about the universe itself, was about to change. When do we begin? The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Nikolai followed Zora through a maze of crystal formations that seemed to respond to her presence, their inner light creating pathways that hadn't existed moments before. His scientific equipment had stopped working entirely, or rather, as Zora explained, it was working perfectly but could no longer interpret the reality around them. We exist in what your people might call a quantum superposition, she said, her voice carrying that strange harmonic that made his bones resonate. Both here and not here, solid and energy, past and present intertwined. They approached what appeared to be a solid crystal wall, easily 30 meters high. Zora placed her hand against its surface, and ripples of light spread from her touch. The wall became transparent, then seemed to fold in on itself, revealing a hidden valley beyond. Nikolai's breath caught in his throat. Below them stretched a vast network of crystalline structures, organic yet geometrically perfect, pulsing with life and purpose. Beings like Zora moved among them, their translucent forms catching and reflecting light in mesmerizing patterns. "Welcome to Haven," Zora said, watching his reaction carefully. "One of our last remaining cities." Last remaining. Nikolai tore his gaze away from the spectacular view. What happened to the others? Sadness flickered across her features. The phase shift that protects us is failing. When it does, our civilization will be exposed to your dimension completely. Some of our cities have already begun to bleed through. Your people call them quantum anomalies or spatial distortions. They study them without understanding what they're seeing. They descended into the valley along a path that materialized beneath their feet. Nikolai noticed how the other luminary watched him, not with hostility, but with intense curiosity. Children, their forms even more ethereal than the adults, peeked out from behind crystal formations before darting away in flashes of light. "Your people are beautiful," he said, meaning it. "But I don't understand. Why show me all this? Why now?" Zara led him to a central structure that dwarfed the others. Its surface rippled with images, stars being born, galaxies spinning, civilizations rising and falling. "Because we've seen the timelines, Nikolai, all possible futures. In most of them, the merger of our dimensions leads to conflict, fear, destruction. But in a few, a precious few, there is harmony, understanding. Those futures all have one thing in common." "What's that?" "You." She turned to face him fully. "Or rather, someone like you. A bridge builder. Someone who can help both sides understand each other before fear takes root." Inside the structure, other luminary gathered. They were different from Zara. Older, their forms more complex, their light more intense. One stepped forward, his presence filling the chamber with a sense of ancient wisdom. "I am Theron," he said, his voice carrying layers of meaning Nikolai could barely comprehend. "Lead guardian of Haven. What Zara has told you is true, but it is not the complete truth. The phase shift's failure is not natural. It was caused. By whom? By us. By you. By choices made eons ago when our peoples first met." Theron gestured, and the walls around them came alive with images. Nikolai saw ancient human-like figures standing among the luminary, saw magnificent cities that spanned both phases of reality, saw terrible weapons being forged. "We were not always separate," Zora explained. "Long ago, our peoples lived together, shared knowledge, built wonders. But there were those who sought to use our phase-shifting abilities as weapons. The resulting war nearly destroyed both civilizations. We chose to retreat into this phase of reality, to become myths and legends, while your people forgot we ever existed. Theron's form pulsed with urgency. But now we have no choice. The barrier weakens, and we can no longer maintain the shift. We must find a way to coexist again, but this time, we must do it right. What do you need from me? Nikolai asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Learn our ways, Zara said. Not just our science, but our culture, our history, our truth. When the barrier falls, be our voice among your people. Help them understand that we are not a threat, not a resource to be exploited, but potential allies who can help humanity reach heights they've never imagined. Theron moved closer, his form towering over Nikolai. But be warned, this knowledge comes with responsibility. Once you begin this path, you cannot unlearn what you discover. Your very perception of reality will change. Are you prepared for that? Nikolai looked around the chamber, at the ancient wisdom encoded in its walls, at the faces of beings who had chosen isolation over conflict. He thought of the scientific community's reaction to this discovery, of the military's interest, of the corporations that would seek to exploit this world's wonders. I understand, he said. When do we begin? Theron's form brightened. We already have. The process of becoming a bridge between worlds, Nikolai discovered, was far more complex than he'd imagined. For 3 days, he'd been undergoing what the luminary called the Trust Protocol, a series of trials designed to prepare his mind and body for the deeper connection to come. Your physical form must learn to exist partially in our phase, Zara explained as she guided him through a chamber filled with singing crystals. Each note they produced created visible ripples in the air, like stones dropped in a still pond. Without this adaptation, the knowledge transfer would overwhelm your consciousness. Nikolai's skin had begun to change, taking on a subtle iridescence that reminded him of soap bubbles in sunlight. The transformation wasn't painful, but it left him with a constant sensation of being slightly out of sync with himself, as if he were watching his body move a fraction of a second after giving it commands. Focus, Theron instructed from somewhere both near and impossibly distant. Feel the resonance between your atomic structure and the crystal matrix. Let it guide your transition. The chamber's song grew more intense, and Nikolai felt his perception shift. He could see the quantum fields that surrounded every object, the probability clouds that defined the position of each particle. The luminary no longer appeared as solid beings, but as complex patterns of energy and information, their thoughts visible as cascading waves of light. Remarkable, a new voice said. Through his altered perception, Nikolai saw another luminary approach. Unlike the others, her form was a deep violet, almost black, with streaks of silver that moved like lightning through storm clouds. He adapts quickly. Nikolai, this is Venna, Zara said. She is our leading expert in cross-phase genetics. She's been monitoring your transformation. Venna moved around him in a way that seemed to bend space itself. Your cellular structure is accepting the quantum modifications better than any previous subject. It's as if. She paused, her form flickering with surprise. As if your DNA already contained dormant markers for this capability. Theron's energy pattern shifted, showing what Nikolai was learning to recognize as concern. Is that possible? The ancient records speak of hybridization experiments, Venna said. Before the Great Separation, some humans were given the ability to shift between phases. We assumed the genetic modifications had been lost over millennia of normal reproduction. Nikolai tried to process this information through his increasingly altered consciousness. Are you saying I'm part luminary? No, Venna replied. But somewhere in your family tree, someone was modified to carry our genetic potential. It explains why you can perceive our reality so clearly, why the crystals respond to your presence. The chamber's song changed pitch, and Nikolai felt a sudden surge of awareness. He could see beyond the walls now, into the quantum substrate that connected all things. The entire city of Haven spread out before his consciousness, not just its physical structure, but the complex web of thoughts, emotions, and memories that gave it life. The genetic markers are activating fully, Ven observed. His consciousness is expanding beyond normal human parameters. Nikolai saw flashes of history, the first contact between humans and luminary, the sharing of knowledge, the terrible weapons that were created, the decision to separate. But he saw something else too, something that made his newly enhanced senses recoil in horror. The barrier, he gasped. It's not just failing, it's being deliberately weakened. Someone on both sides is working to bring it down. Zara's energy pattern flared with alarm. What do you mean? There's a pattern in the decay, too regular to be natural. Someone has been planting devices, quantum resonators, at key points around the planet. They're creating a feedback loop that's destabilizing the phase separation. Theron moved closer, his presence overwhelming in Nikolai's expanded awareness. Can you see who? The vision shifted, showing him glimpses of shadowy figures moving through the crystal fields, placing devices that pulsed with malevolent purpose. Some were human, wearing corporate logos he didn't recognize. Others were luminary, their forms darkened and distorted by what they were doing. The crystalline fields pulsed with warning frequencies as Nikolai and Zara moved through the quantum shadows, tracking the resonator signals. His partially phased body felt like mercury, fluid and unstable, but the genetic modifications were holding. For now. Another reading, he whispered, though traditional sound wasn't necessary for communication in this state. 200 meters ahead, near that formation cluster, they found the device nestled among the crystals, its dark purpose an ugly smear against the natural quantum harmonics of the landscape. It was smaller than Nikolai had expected, about the size of his palm, but its effect on local reality was devastating. Reality itself seemed to bend around it, creating microscopic tears in the barrier between phases. That makes 7, Zara said, her energy pattern tight with concern. But we're running out of time. Each one we disable seems to accelerate the decay somewhere else. A shadow moved at the edge of Nikolai's expanded perception. We're not alone. 3 figures emerged from a quantum fold, 2 human forms in advanced stealth suits, and 1 luminary whose darkness seemed to eat away at the light around them. The dark luminary spoke first, their voice carrying harmonics of corruption that made Nikolai's new senses ache. The hybrid survives. Impressive. The figure solidified slightly, revealing features twisted by prolonged exposure to uncontrolled phase shifting. I am Moros, and you are interfering with inevitable progress. Progress. Zara's form flared with anger. You're trying to tear reality apart. We're trying to restore what was lost, one of the humans said, removing her helmet to reveal sharp features and cybernetic implants. Humanity and luminary, united again. No more barriers, no more secrets. A conspiracy, he said. They're working together, outcasts from both civilizations. They want to force a violent merger, create chaos they can exploit. He turned to Theron, his voice urgent. How long do we have? The ancient guardian's form dimmed. Days, perhaps. The resonators have been operating for months. We detected their effects but couldn't locate their source. Your unique perspective has revealed what we couldn't see. Then we have to stop them, Nikolai said, but Venna held up a hand that trailing quantum possibilities. You're not ready, she said. The protocol isn't complete. Without full adaptation, you could lose yourself between phases. Zara moved to his side, her energy intertwining supportively with his newly awakened field. She's right. You need more time. But Nikolai could feel the barrier weakening with each passing moment, could see the strain it was placing on the fabric of reality itself. Time, he said, is the one thing we don't have. The crystalline fields pulsed with warning frequencies as Nikolai and Zara moved through the quantum shadows, tracking the resonator signals. His partially phased body felt like mercury, fluid and unstable, but the genetic modifications were holding. For now. Another reading, he whispered, though traditional sound wasn't necessary for communication in this state. 200 meters ahead, near that formation cluster, they found the device nestled among the crystals, its dark purpose an ugly smear against the natural quantum harmonics of the landscape. It was smaller than Nikolai had expected, about the size of his palm, but its effect on local reality was devastating. Reality itself seemed to bend around it, creating microscopic tears in the barrier between phases. "That makes 7, Zara said, her energy pattern tight with concern. "But we're running out of time. Each one we disable seems to accelerate the decay somewhere else." A shadow moved at the edge of Nikolai's expanded perception. "We're not alone." 3 figures emerged from a quantum fold, 2 human forms in advanced stealth suits, and 1 luminary whose darkness seemed to eat away at the light around them. The dark luminary spoke first, their voice carrying harmonics of corruption that made Nikolai's new senses ache. "The hybrid survives." "Impressive." The figure solidified slightly, revealing features twisted by prolonged exposure to uncontrolled phase shifting. "I am Moros, and you are interfering with inevitable progress." "Progress?" Zara's form flared with anger. "You're trying to tear reality apart." "We're trying to restore what was lost," one of the humans said, removing her helmet to reveal sharp features and cybernetic implants. "Humanity and Luminary, united again. No more barriers, no more secrets." "Dr. Reina Santos," Nikolai said, recognizing her from scientific journals. "You disappeared 3 years ago during a quantum physics experiment." "I didn't disappear," she smiled, the expression cold. "I transcended. Moros showed me the truth, that humanity's next evolution requires a merger with luminary consciousness. The barrier between phases is an artificial constraint that's holding both our species back." The second human raised a device that hummed with dangerous energy. "Enough talk. They've been disabling the resonators. They'd need to be eliminated." But Nikolai's enhanced perception had been analyzing the quantum fields around them, seeing patterns within patterns. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "The barrier isn't just a division between phases. It's maintaining a delicate balance. If it falls too quickly—" "We understand perfectly," Moros interrupted. "Chaos is necessary for evolution. From the destruction of old orders, new forms emerge." Nikolai felt Zara's energy field pulse with recognition. "You're one of the original architects," she said. "You helped design the barrier. And now I will help unmake it." Moros gestured, and reality rippled. The ground beneath them began to crystallize and shatter simultaneously, existing in multiple states at once. Nikolai reached for the quantum awareness. The trust protocol had awakened in him. Time seemed to slow as probability fields became visible around them. He saw the trajectory of the human's weapon before it fired, saw the way Moros was attempting to destabilize their phase alignment. "Zara, the resonator," he shouted, pushing her aside as a burst of quantum-disrupting energy passed through the space she had occupied. His partially phased body absorbed some of the blast, sending waves of agony through his transformed nervous system. The firefight that followed existed in multiple phases of reality simultaneously. Energy beams passed through quantum shadows, crystalline shields formed and shattered in the same instant, and the very fabric of space-time began to buckle under the strain. Through it all, Nikolai could feel his connection to both phases growing stronger rather than weaker. The dormant genetic markers in his DNA were responding to the chaos, adapting, evolving. He saw possibilities branching out like crystal formations, timelines splitting and recombining. "The resonator network," Dr. Santos shouted. "Activated now." Moros reached into the quantum substrate, sending a pulse of dark energy through the crystalline field. All around them, the hidden resonators began to activate simultaneously. The barrier between phases started to tear like tissue paper. But in that moment of crisis, Nikolai saw something that neither side had considered. The genetic modifications that allowed him to exist in both phases weren't just an accident or a leftover from ancient experiments. They were a key, and the quantum chaos around them had just shown him how to use it. "Zara," he called out, reaching for her energy field. "I need your help. The barrier, it's not supposed to separate our peoples. It's supposed to connect them, but only when they're ready." Understanding flowed between them as their quantum fields aligned. Above them, reality itself began to fracture, but Nikolai could see the pattern now, the true purpose of the ancient design. All they needed was a bridge, and he had become exactly that. The only question was whether they could implement this revelation before Moros and his followers tore apart the very fabric of existence around them. The world was coming apart at the quantum level. Crystalline formations shattered and reformed in impossible patterns as the resonator network tore at the barrier between phases. Nikolai stood at the center of the chaos, his transformed consciousness spanning both realities, finally understanding the truth that had been encoded in his genes generations ago. "The barrier was never meant to be permanent," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that rippled through both phases. "It was designed to last until someone could bridge the gap naturally." Moros launched another attack, dark energy cascading around them. "You understand nothing. The barrier is a prison, and we will break it." But Nikolai could see it now, the intricate quantum architecture that the ancient builders had created. It wasn't a wall. It was a filter, designed to prevent connection until both species had evolved enough to handle it safely. His unique genetic structure wasn't an accident or an experiment. It was the culmination of a plan centuries in the making. "Zara," he called out, reaching for her across the quantum field. "Help me show them." Their energies merged, and suddenly everyone present could see what Nikolai saw. The barrier's true nature revealed itself in patterns of light and probability. Not a division, but a protective membrane that had been nurturing both species, preparing them for eventual reunion. Dr. Santos faltered, her cybernetic implants crackling with feedback. This isn't what our data showed." "Because you were looking for weakness," Nikolai explained, maintaining the connection with Zara as reality fluctuated around them. "You never saw the pattern because you were trying to break it rather than understand it." The resonators continued their destructive work, but now Nikolai understood how to counter them. His hybrid quantum state wasn't just allowing him to exist in both phases, it was giving him the ability to manipulate the barrier itself. The genetic modifications. Vena's voice came through the chaos as she and Theron arrived with other luminary. They were a seed planted by the architects, a key that would only work when both species were ready to reunite. Moros launched himself at Nikolai, his corrupted form leaving trails of quantum decay. "Then we'll destroy the key." But Nikolai was ready. Using his newfound understanding, he reached into the quantum substrate and began to repair the damage the resonators had caused. Each adjustment was like tuning a vast, multidimensional instrument. The crystals around them began to sing in harmony. "Stop him," Moros commanded, but his human allies were transfixed by the display of quantum manipulation that their cybernetic enhancements allowed them to perceive. Zara's energy field expanded, protecting Nikolai as he worked. The other luminary joined their power to hers, creating a network of light that mirrored the crystalline structures around them. Even Dr. Santos and her companion lowered their weapons, their enhanced senses recognizing the beauty of what was unfolding. "The barrier isn't falling," Theron observed with awe. "It's transforming." Nikolai guided the change, using his hybrid nature to show the barrier its new form. Instead of a rigid separation between phases, it became permeable, allowing controlled interaction while preventing the chaos Moros had hoped to unleash. The resonators, their purpose now opposed by the very fabric of reality they had sought to manipulate, began to fail. Each failure released a pulse of energy that Nikolai and the luminary channeled into strengthening the transformed barrier. Moros made one final attempt to disrupt the process, gathering all his corrupted power into a single attack. But as he launched it, Dr. Santos surprised everyone by stepping into its path, her cybernetic systems overloading as they absorbed the blast. "I understand now," she gasped as Nikolai caught her falling form. We were trying to force something that needed to happen naturally. The transformed barrier settled into its new configuration, creating zones where both phases naturally overlapped. The crystal formations pulsed with renewed life, their song changing to celebrate the change. Moros, his power spent, began to fade from both phases. You don't realize what you've done. The old separation protected both species from their own worst impulses. No, Nicolay said, still supporting Dr. Santos as medical luminary approached to help her. It protected us until we were ready to face those impulses together. Look around you. Humans and luminary working in harmony, just as the architects planned. Zara moved to his side, her energy field still intertwined with his. What happens now? Nikolai looked at the transformed landscape, where crystals shimmered with possibilities and the barrier rippled like aurora borealis. Now we build bridges instead of walls. We learn from each other, grow together. It won't be easy. Change never is. But for the first time in centuries, both our species can face the future as one. The crystals sang their agreement, their harmonies carrying through both phases of reality. Above them, the violet sky of LV-247 began to clear, revealing stars that now shone with new meaning. Somewhere out there, humanity was waiting to learn they weren't alone in the universe. Thanks to the foresight of ancient architects and the courage to embrace change, they would make that discovery not through conflict, but through understanding. And Nikolai, standing between worlds with Zara by his side, knew that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The legacy of two worlds would be written not in separation, but in unity. The real work, the work of bringing two civilizations together, was just beginning. The crystals pulsed one final time, their light reaching across both phases of reality, illuminating the path forward for all who were ready to walk it.